Now available in paperback and e-readers, Spellbound, A Darker Shade of Black. Get your copy today at your favorite online bookseller. One of my viewers wanted me to talk about this myth of acting white. Now, there's this whole myth in the black community of black people, so-called acting white, if they decide to speak well, if they decide to go out here and make good grades in school and not get into trouble, or if they have interests in hobbies like comic books, science fiction, or fantasy, or want to go out here and participate in an alternative lifestyle like the goth subculture. If a black person decides to act or behave in these ways, you oftentimes have some black people out here who will say that that black person is acting white or trying to be white, and that they are betraying their race and their culture. However, the person who makes those statements really doesn't know what they're talking about, because going out here and speaking well, making good grades, or being interested in hobbies like comic books, science fiction, or fantasy, or participating in lifestyles like the goth subculture does not mean a black person is acting white. It means that that black person is deciding to be themselves, and they are defining their blackness by what they believe to be who they are. And that's every black American's right under the United States Constitution. Unfortunately, because the black community has been a matriarchy for over 50 years, many black people are believing that they have to live in a black box that is acceptable to white people. And as many black people have bought into that black box that is acceptable to white people, what these spellbound black people do is try to fit themselves into these stereotype roles that will allow them to be accepted by your white supremacist. And I go in depth on this in my novel Spellbound, where I have the Matilda Crowley character who is being bullied for not being the so-called black that is acceptable to white people, and she's being bullied by black people who are going after her because she is not acting in the so-called prescribed way of being black. But that prescribed way of being black is a social construct created by your white supremacists, and that prescribed way of being black is prescribed by your white supremacists because they want a clear definition of black so that they can quickly identify black people so that they can fit them into those roles that are stereotypical and be able to put people in those boxes so that they cannot go out here and grow to a much more actualized version of themselves. So what they want to do is arrest the development of black people by putting black people into these boxes where they can only be these stereotype roles like a thug, a hood rat, a baby mama, or a ghetto king or ghetto queen. And that is to make those black people into stereotypes that make your white supremacist feel comfortable as related to their smooth world. Because the white supremacist, basically, the only black people he wants to see are stereotypes, because those stereotypes make him feel secure about his place in the world and the fact that he doesn't have to worry about any of those black people going out here and competing with him or his children, or going out here and showing a bigger picture of black people. But once you break out of those social constructs that are created by your white supremacists through their institutions like Madison Avenue and Hollywood, you start to see that there is a bigger and richer picture of black people and a larger world of black people. And in that larger world of black people don't see themselves as acting white. No, because they know who they are as black people. They know that their ancestors defined blackness on their own terms. Because once the slaves left slavery and got their own freedom, we oftentimes focused on excellence, and our ancestors oftentimes wanted us to go out here and behave in a way that reflected the best as related to the race. So many of our ancestors wanted to go out here and be well spoken. Many of our ancestors wanted to go out here and get good grades in school because we wanted to show that black meant excellence, and we wanted to show that black meant excellence because so many white supremacists out here wanted to show that blacks were inferior, blacks were on the level of animals, and according to their U.S. Constitution, a black person was only 3/5 of a person. So many of our ancestors wanted to go out here and show that a black man and a black woman were on the level of your white person or any other person in this world, and we always focused on excellence and being the best. And that wasn't about acting white, that was about defining black on our terms. And that's something that many young people over the last 50 years did not learn, being a part of the black matriarchy tree, because they were indoctrinated by white supremacists through their media to believe that black was associated with the streets, associated with the hood, associated with the ghetto, and that was by design because the white supremacists did not want black Americans focused on the excellence that their ancestors made a standard for life, because what the white supremacists wanted to do was they wanted to go out here and box foundational black Americans' minds in by making them believe that these repackaged racist caricatures were the standard for being black. Because the whole idea of what they consider to be a real black person is basically these old stereotypes from the antebellum South, such as the black brute who lusts after white women and has no self-control and is extremely violent, your Jezebel who is sexually promiscuous, your mammy who lives to take care of a white person's children and a white person, or your Sambo who just lives to be lazy and go out here and do nothing with his life. The mainstream media was pushing these kinds of stereotypes, and sadly, because many black people do not have any sort of family to sit down and talk to them about how these stereotypes are not real and do not really reflect black people, many people buy into these stereotypes and believe that this is the reality for black people, but this is a social construct created by white supremacists to make us believe in their reality instead of creating our own reality the way our ancestors did during the days of Reconstruction and the days of Jim Crow. During the days of Reconstruction and Jim Crow, our ancestors went out here and established high standards for blackness, and we established high standards as related to how we carried and conducted ourselves. And because our ancestors had high standards, we saw black excellence practically every day, and black excellence was considered the standard because we defined blackness on our terms and not on the terms of your white people. Now, your modern day black people, because they bought into integration and wanted white acceptance, they started buying into these stereotypes and believing that this is the way a real black person lives, by going out here and being a stereotype. But that's not who we were. That is not who we are. That is how somebody else sees us. And the big problem is we're not taking a look at how we see ourselves. Now, those of us who have taken a look and seen how we see ourselves and come from functional families, we see ourselves completely different than those people who have bought into that stereotypical media. Now, as a guy who grew up in a family and also watched shows like The Cosby Show, which showed you functional black families, I knew that there was a bigger picture of black life out there, but we don't get to see that bigger picture of black life out there in your mainstream media, because the mainstream media wants black people to be spellbound, and they want you to fit into the black box that is acceptable to white supremacists. And because they want you to fit into the black box that is acceptable to white supremacists, they create stereotypical caricatures that they want you to portray that allow you to fit into their smooth world. And they really want you to be those kind of roles, because that's the reality they want to see. They don't want you to see those other black people out here like myself who are well spoken, who go out here and have hobbies and interests like comic books, science fiction, and fantasy, and know about alternative lifestyles that black people have been participating in for over 40 years, like the goth subculture. They don't want you to see that richer and larger picture of black life. They don't want you to see that richer and larger picture of the black world. No, they want to keep you confined and pinned into the cattle pen of the ghetto, and they want you to swim in the filth of stereotypes and stereotype roles that make your white racists feel comfortable about black people and make them feel safe that your black people, as long as they are in that hog pen of the ghetto, they will not go out here and spread any sort of dirt into their so-called perfect and smooth world. But the reality is, there are black people who have been living life for over a century in this country, and they've been living different lifestyles in different regions of this country, and we've got a whole host of diversity of cultures all across this country, and we're not really seeing any of those cultures in any way, shape, or form in most mainstream media. Most mainstream media only keeps you in the hood, but those of us who have gone out here and seen that bigger picture of black culture, we want to show you that bigger picture, like I do on the SJS Direct imprint with many of my books like Spellbound, or books like A Recipe for Success, or books like The Temptation of John Haynes. I try to show you that bigger picture of black life, and that's to show you that your so-called acting white isn't white at all. This has always been the standard for black people, but sadly many black people's minds get put into that box because there's nobody there to let them know that most of this media you're watching is poison, and because many of these people, they believe in the poison and they have this matriarchal culture, they still buy into this idea, oh, this is so-called black, this is so-called real. If he's from the streets, he's black. If he's from the hood, he's black. But when you start to take a critical examination of those statements, you start to see that these are the same talking points that many of your white supremacists go out here and use. Oh, this is a black guy because he's from the streets. This is a black guy because he's from the hood. This is a black guy because he drinks 40s. This is a black guy because he's a thug. These are not our talking points about being black. No, our definition of black is a darker shade of black, and our definition of black is about us being true to ourselves, and we don't get to see us being true to ourselves in a lot of this media out here. And that's why it's important to go out here and pick up new black media like on the SJS Direct imprint, books like Spellbound, books like The Thetas, books like ISIS Imitation of Life and A Recipe for Success, books that will show you a broader and bigger picture of a diversity of thought as related to the black experience, because the whole myth of acting white is just that, a myth. And once you open your mind and start to see that bigger picture of black, you'll start to see that black culture is a lot larger than what you think you've experienced. And once you start to see that larger world, you'll start to see that there's a bigger black community than your so-called ghetto, and there's a much larger world with a lot of highways and byways than the streets of your so-called inner city. And once you open your mind to that world and start to see the diversity of black culture just right here in America and the diversity of thought here in America, you're going to wind up with a better understanding of what black is, because once you see that definition of blackness, you'll start to really understand that there's more to black than what most people most people know out here. Now, no other culture has this going on, where we go out here and castigate people in their communities for acting and behaving in different ways. You don't see this in the Hispanic community. You don't see it in the Asian community too much. You don't even see it in the Arab community. But in the black community, it is considered the thing to go out here and attack black people for so-called acting white, when in actuality, those black people are acting just like their ancestors wanted them to behave. And this was the standard that our ancestors wanted to go out here and establish for our behavior. Because if you look at our history and look at our culture, the original definition of what black was always about excellence. It was always about being the best, and it was always about presenting an image of excellence in all of our conduct and our behavior. We were not the guys going out here sagging our pants. We were not the guys going out here talking and using profanity all the time. We were not that image. No, most black people always presented themselves as polished, well-spoken, highly intelligent, and wanted to show the world the best about being black, because the racists wanted to present the image that being black meant ignorance, and they wanted to actually project all of their own insecurities regarding not being able to compete with black people onto us. So they wanted to go out here and make us look inferior so that they could appear to be superior. But the truth of the matter is, black people have always been on a high level, and the whole thing is, we have to go out here and understand that we don't need to buy into their mythology. We don't need to buy into their stereotypes. We can go out here and define ourselves, and the way we define ourselves is by shattering this myth of acting white and focus on being the best black people we can be. Now, this was a video requested by one of my viewers, and if you want to request a video, you can send a donation to the Cash App or the PayPal by clicking the links in the description box, and if I know something about that subject, I will make that video for you. And if you want to learn more about the black box that many black people want to fit in to be accepted by white people, you can pick up my novel Spellbound on Amazon.com to learn all about the concept of how black people get spellbound and go out here trying to be stereotypes so that they can fit into a black box that will make them acceptable to white people and fit into a white world. Now, that's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, ISIS Legacy. Sorority secrets of the goddess next door are revealed in this all-new ISIS series adventure. Get ISIS Legacy in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere.